Lander, Scrum Master with the ATO. Been with the standard for about 4 months now and been a Scrum Master for 10 years.
And I am Mackenzie Ginnathan, another Scrum Master with ATO. Been with the standard about the same amount of time as Mark has. And this is our first little experiment with kind of talking about some agile pitfalls. Today we're starting with the daily stand-up, probably my favorite Scrum event of all the events. And I think it's one of the most important ones for teams to nail. And that's why we're starting here. So let's just kick it off. Let's get started and talk about some of the pitfalls that we have commonly seen with our Scrum teams, Mark. And what's that first pitfall that you can think of that really stands out in your mind?
Yeah, the first indicator that stand-up may not be running as efficiently as possible is the meeting becomes more of a status report instead of coordination across the team.
Totally. And when we're in person, you can definitely see this when the team members would be like reporting their status to the Scrum Master. So that's like one indication, right? They're like staring at you as you're going through person by person. And it's like, wait, this needs to be more of like a coordination meeting. Like the team needs to be talking together as opposed to just like giving their status to the Scrum Master or like a project manager that's in the meeting. So that's something that I saw in person. It's a little bit harder to see that when working remote though. So like, what are some other things like remote that kind of cue you off to that, Mark?
Yeah, I was going to say on that point, one of my favorite tricks is to avoid eye contact with the team members so that they're unable to like give that directly to you. So working remotely, you kind of don't have that option. You're just talking to a camera. So I think it's important to reinforce with the team that the meeting is not really about a checklist of things that have been done. It's really about that coordination.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, some of the other things, working remotely, like the meeting kind of feels mechanical, like you're just going through the motions and people just talk about, especially like when you go with the three questions of what did I do yesterday, today, and what do I plan, or are there any blockers? And people just kind of run through that like a checklist and you kind of notice everyone else is checking out. That's a good indication that this is kind of more of like a status meeting that no one's really paying attention. So we're looking for those like rich like discussions about the work and coordinating a plan for the day and how they're going to accomplish that work. So that's kind of what we're looking for.
And it's really easy to fall into a trap where you're just running down a list of things done yesterday when the real key of the meeting is to tie this to sprint goals. Because everyone could have been in a meeting yesterday. We don't need to hear all the meetings everyone was in. It's really about what have you done yesterday to contribute towards the sprint goal and what are you doing today and where do you need help?
Yep. That's definitely a huge benefit of having a sprint goal, which can be hard to define, but they really act to kind of like bring the team together into a common purpose and then talk about that common purpose every day, right? Exactly. And what we can do today to move that common purpose forward day by day, right? I think lastly, just one of the big tips to kind of avoid this, I think maybe not tip, but like more of an experiment that may work for some teams and may not work for others, is to move away from asking the three questions and moving towards walking the board, which is like just bring up your Jira board or Huddle board or whatever. And I like to just go kind of top to bottom and then look at what's kind of either in testing or review, start there and then work your way back to like what's in progress. And then I don't really review stuff that's like open, right? Like stuff that isn't like being worked on, I kind of ignore that. But I kind of just center on the work itself that's in progress and just go top to bottom for that work and just like, what does it take for us to get this work to the next column, right? And just have that be the driving question that really acts as a way to kind of push the team forward. So some tips on how to move forward, Mark.
Yeah, just on that point, I really like that for a couple of reasons. One, by starting at the end of the board, you're really putting an emphasis on how do we get work done to be done. And then two, moving away from the individual report, you really put that emphasis on team accountability. Less about individual ownership, more about how as a team are we moving all this work forward.
Yeah. Those are some benefits I've seen as well, like from walking the board as opposed to the three questions. But cool. Let's move on to the next one. Mark, what do we have next?
The meeting doesn't happen if a Scrum Master is not present.
Oof. This one hit home. It hits home big time. I guess like in my previous experiences with teams, the way I usually notice this is obviously like I'm on PTO or I get pulled into like a high priority meeting and then I just go and I don't really have time or forget to kind of update the team that I won't be available for the daily stand-up. And then in the meeting or afterwards, I kind of see the chat of the team talking about, hey, Mackenzie's not here. Is stand-up even happening?
Yeah.
Should we just cancel today? And it's like, oh, well, yeah, let's just cancel it. And like my heart breaks a little bit when that happens, you know? Uh, yeah, and it's like, so what's wrong with that, Mark? Like, do you need the Scrum Master for the daily stand-up?
Absolutely not. And I'm the same way. Like I view that as, especially with with a new team, it's a milestone for me as a Scrum Master. Can I be gone for a week? What's going to happen? And it's really a litmus test for buy-in to the process. And so, no, it is a common pitfall to think that the Scrum Master is the only one that can facilitate that meeting. And that's not true. We're accountable for making that happen. And usually on a new team, you start out to reinforce those good practices. But it's really about the buy-in and generating that understanding that the stand-up, especially more than any of these other ceremonies that we have, the stand-up is for the team.
Yes.
It should be run by the team and for the team. They are the primary stakeholders for that discussion, and it's about
And
how do we work together.
yeah, that's a great point, which is like, what is the purpose of the stand-up? And you're right, it really is about the dev team. And like it just, I mean, when you look at the Scrum Guide, I always have to remind myself by reading the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide says it's for the development team, right? The Scrum Master is just there to kind of coach them and help make sure that it happens and it's, productive, but it's not about the Scrum Master whatsoever. Um, yeah, definitely. One thing I've tried in the past is I'm thinking of a past team where I left, the stand up didn't happen, my heart broke, and then I try to like coach the team that like, hey, this isn't about me, it's about the team, like coming up with a plan together and how you're going to accomplish your goals. And I kind of let time pass a little bit. And so what I did, I don't know if this is good or bad, but I just randomly not attend a stand up. I didn't tell anybody. I just like didn't. I could have attended, but I didn't attend because I wanted to see, are they going to go through with it? Are they going to kind of
Right.
like like learn from their past and kind of come together? And it was a little janky, but they did it. They came together. There was a little awkwardness of like, oh, Mackenzie's not here, but they kind of came together. They made it happen, and slowly but surely they became a little bit more of a self-organizing team, which is kind of what we're trying to get towards, right? Um,
Yeah, it really is a live experiment that first. It's like, well, we're going to see where we're at. And for me, it really is that test of, are they bought into the process? Do they understand why we're doing this? And it's
and
funny, real quick, before you move on, there's
yeah,
probably a whole topic of like what the Scrum Master role is about, but it's interesting how there's that emotional investment, and that when it doesn't happen, you do kind of have that little heartbreak. But the first time it does happen, when someone just steps up and the meeting happens exactly as it has the whole time, it like, the team is crushing it.
yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it. Like Scrum Mastering is all about heartbreaks and happiness, and
Right.
it's just what we go through day to day. I would say like the only thing else I can think of to kind of prevent this, besides just like not showing up, which is kind of pretty aggressive maneuver, is to get in front of this before you do leave, right? So I think what you can try to do to help coach that this is about the dev team is to, once the team kind of gets settled in their process, to start backing off and then start asking the question of like, hey, like who else would like to kind of run and
Right.
facilitate stand up, right? And not to say that you need like a replacement on the team. It's more of like, hey, maybe we can rotate this, maybe once a day, once a week, once a sprint, whatever. Just like make it less about the scrum master and more about the team. So it's like helping them kind of like who else would like to facilitate this, and yeah, that can help kind of get ahead of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea that I don't take advantage of that enough, is that you really can get ahead of it by fostering, especially something like a team rotation. Once the process is kind of stable and everyone kind of understands the flow of the meeting, having that rotate kind of takes that emphasis off of the scrum master having to be there
Yep,
and kind of builds that practice in.
yep. And it's that just really resonates with me because it's one part self-organization, another part cross-functional. Remember, we're
Right.
trying to develop cross-functional teams, not only our developers and testers, but also scrum masters, right? So it's like it's not just all bottleneck to like one person. Like this is you're pigeonholed to this one thing. You can only do that one thing. It's like no, we want to spread that across all the team members. So it's just a healthier team, right?
Right. I like that.
All right. Next up. So this is one that comes up a lot, which is just people getting into the details of the work they're doing or the problem they're facing. And they kind of go on a monologue. They're just going to the details. And then what you'll also notice other team members kind of jumping in, and now the stand up is turning into like a problem solving meeting as opposed to like that coordination meeting for the day. Very common problem. Any other like symptoms you see with this, Mark, for this problem?
Yeah, I really take that as a sign. When it gets to details, it's a lack of understanding that the point of the meeting is not about that status update. It is about coordination. And it's
Mm,
also can be a sign that there's not enough informal communication generally across the team. Like if
mm,
stand-ups start to run long because of that, maybe they aren't having conversations elsewhere as
mm.
part of doing their work.
That's a good point. I never thought about that. Yeah, where it's like they're trying to like fit in everything that's in their head. Like
Right.
it's like, oh well, I'll just save it for stand up and then just like dump it on everybody instead of that using chats. Yeah, I guess it's just we have chats now for remote work. That's a really good point. Um, so yeah, Mark, what are your common tips and tricks when this happens? When you see team members doing this or teams turn this into like a problem solving event, what do you usually do?
Yeah, when I see that specifically, again, like I said, I view that as a sign of, well, maybe we don't have the right level of communication generally. So I start taking a look at, and this is obviously easier in the office when you have those informal communications. But even so remotely, it really does come down to let's reinforce the chats in the channels that we have and probably touch on visibility. Like how do
Mm,
we make all of this visible? It's really easy for this work to be siloed, which is probably, if this is happening, why it might build up into, hey, I've got to do a big brain dump and stand up once a day. It's, well, how can we coach the team to kind of turn those conversations into organic, asynchronous, visible ways of communicating?
yeah, totally. And this really kind of reminds me of another issue that I didn't think of, which I should have, which is, yeah, people saving up the information for stand up, right? I've often, working in the office, I'll talk to somebody like, oh yeah, I'm running into this problem, or I need to talk to this person, but oh yeah, I'll just do it in stand up. And I'm just looking at them like, why would you wait till stand up? Like that, like we had these check-ins, these formal events to kind of help us move along, help us keep us like accountable, but you shouldn't just be waiting for them. Like just do
Right.
it. Go out, reach out to this person, bring up issues you're having. Like don't wait for stand up to bring up, especially blockers, right? Don't wait. Some things that I do is, I coach the team on once again the purpose of stand up and what we're really trying to accomplish here. It's not a problem solving event. It's more of coordination. Some other things that help facilitate this is like setting up an after party, either formally or informally,
That's a great
right?
one.
So I've seen some teams where they like literally create a meeting invite of the after party.
Hmm.
So it does become easier to kind of like, hey, let's save that for the after party of the meeting or whatever. But you can also just do that informally, like, oh yeah, can we just save this for after stand up? And then, people hop off the meeting and then they just start chatting, or if need be, they'll just set up like a video call. It can be very organic if need be, right?
Right.
So I found that to be very helpful. And lastly, like, I don't know, Mark, I don't know what our differences are in this aspect, like interrupting people, cutting them off. That's a
Yes.
tricky
It's always
one.
a tricky one.
It's a tricky one, right? It's you don't want to do it too frequently or too you don't want to be quick to interrupt people, but also you can kind of tell there's those people where it's like they're praying that someone interrupts this person just because like we're just going off on a tangent, right? So like when that happens, you try to like uh just try to jump in there, but try to be very tactful with it. And I don't know, Mark, if you have a specific line you use. I think I usually it's like, oh, can we save this for after, or like, are we diving too much in the details here? Can we save this for after stand up, right? Something like that. Is there a line you use, Mark?
No, just something like that generally. And honestly, I've erred on both sides. I think it's impossible to get that balance right because, like I said previously, like if the stand-ups, if they're going too far into the details, they may be lacking that communication. It's really
Mm,
hard to understand, hey, do I allow for a minute or two here for them to go into the weeds? Is this necessary right now? So it's a tough line to straddle. But yeah, it totally has to come back to, hey, we're here for coordination and visibility and help, and then kind of shift that to, is this something we can talk about after stand-up?
yep. And that brings up a good point, which is sometimes I let it go. I let the team go
Right.
into the details. I let them problem solve in the daily stand up. And, I've let stand ups go like 20 minutes, 30 minutes long. And
Sure.
it was because I could tell that we're talking about something really bothering the team, a problem, and there were some great conversations that were being had, and I didn't want to interrupt that flow, right? It's
Totally.
like I could sense the meeting shifting from, okay, this was like stand up. We were coordinating. Now we're kind of diving into the details and we are problem solving, but it's such an important problem that we really do need to talk about it. And honestly, I just let it go because
Right.
otherwise it's like, what am I going to do? Like tell the team to stop talking
Right.
and then set up a meeting afterward. It's like, well, we're here now. Let's just keep talking about it. So in those instances, you just kind of have to realize like, okay, stand up was kind of a wash today, but we had some great conversations around a sticky problem, and that was really what needed to be discussed today. So, there's no hard and fast rules here. We're just kind of,
Yeah, there are
doing our
absolutely
best.
times when sticking to the 15-minute time box is secondary to the conversation that's actually happening. Like
Yeah.
sometimes that is just the right thing that is needed for the team.
Yep. Exactly. Cool. All right, that wraps up our last one. And I think if we get some good traction on this, Mark, we could follow up with part two because there's lots with the
I think
daily
so.
stand-up, right? So we'll leave it at that. We'll keep this nice and short, but look forward to other pitfalls of other Scrum events and even Scrum roles. So thanks for stopping by, and yeah, looking forward to other videos we make.
Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Yep, see you.